The cargo hold hummed with the steady rhythm of the ship's engines as Daewon completed his final inspection of the supply crates. He had been working on the Eternal Prospect for 3 years now, and the routine had become second nature to him. Check the seals, verify the manifest, ensure nothing had shifted during the jump through hyperspace. Simple work, but important work. He was tired. The double shift had worn him down more than usual. At 42 years old, he wasn't the young soldier he'd once been back on Earth. Those days in the Special Forces felt like another lifetime, another person entirely. Now he was just a cargo officer on a merchant vessel, moving supplies between colonies at the edge of known space. The door to the hold hissed open behind him. Daewon turned to see Kix entering, the first mate's scaled form moving with that peculiar grace the Velthari possessed. The alien's 3 eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made Daewon's instincts flare. "Working late again, human?" Kix's voice carried that strange reverb that all his species had when speaking common tongue. "Just finishing up," Daewon replied, keeping his tone neutral. He had learned long ago that Kix didn't like humans much. The first mate made no secret of it, though he usually kept his contempt to cold looks and clipped words. "Always so dedicated," Kix said, moving closer. "Tell me, Daewon, have you filed your report with Captain Ven yet?" Daewon's jaw tightened. So that was it. 3 days ago, during a routine check of the cargo manifest, he had found discrepancies. Crates that shouldn't be there. Heavy ones. Marked as medical supplies but clearly containing something else. He had investigated further and discovered weapons. Military-grade weapons, the kind that ended up in the hands of insurgents and pirates. "I filed it this morning," Daewon said simply. Kix's eyes narrowed. That was unwise. Before Daewon could react, 4 crew members appeared from behind the stacked crates. 2 humans he recognized as recent hires, along with a Karathi and another Velthari. All of them carried shock batons. "You should have minded your own business," Kix said, stepping back as his accomplices moved forward. Daewon's training kicked in. He grabbed the nearest tool, a heavy scanner, and threw it at the closest attacker. It hit the man in the chest and bought Daewon 2 seconds to move. He dodged the first baton swing and delivered a sharp elbow to another attacker's throat. But there were too many of them. A shock baton caught him in the ribs and pain exploded through his body. His muscles seized and he fell to his knees. Another hit caught him across the back. He tried to rise, tried to fight, but his body wouldn't obey. They dragged him through the corridors. Daewon struggled weakly, his muscles still twitching from the shock baton's effects. Crew members looked away as they passed, fear evident in their eyes. They knew what was happening, but no one would help. No one would stand against Kix. They hauled him to the escape pod bay. Kix opened one of the pods and his accomplices threw Daewon inside. He hit the metal floor hard, gasping for breath. "You humans," Kix said, leaning into the pod entrance. "You think you belong out here among the stars. You think your persistence, your stubborn refusal to give up makes you special, but it makes you dangerous, unpredictable. Ven will know," Daewon managed to say through gritted teeth. The captain met with an unfortunate accident an hour ago," Kix interrupted. "Tragic, really. A malfunction in his quarters. By the time we discovered him, it was too late." Horror filled Daewon's chest. Ven had been a good captain. Fair, honest, and now he was dead because Daewon had reported what he found. "I'm taking command of this vessel," Kix continued, "and my first order is to dispose of excess cargo. You're being jettisoned to Cathera Prime. I'm sure you've heard of it, a lovely garden world where the consortium sends people they want to forget about." "You won't get away with this," Daewon said, forcing himself to sit up. Kix laughed, a harsh clicking sound. "I already have. There's no black box record of this conversation. No evidence of what happened here. You were never on this ship. You never existed." The first mate began entering coordinates into the pod's computer. Daewon could see the destination on the screen. Cathera Prime, he knew the name. Everyone in the merchant fleet knew it. It was a death world. A place where survival was measured in hours, not days. "Why there?" Daewon asked. "Why not just kill me here?" "Because," Kix said, his eyes gleaming with malice, "humans are supposed to be so resilient, so adaptable. I want to see if the stories are true. I want to know if you can survive what that planet throws at you. Spoiler, you can't, no one does." The pod door began to close. Daewon lunged forward, but Kix was faster, stepping back and sealing the hatch. Through the small window, Daewon could see the first mate's satisfied expression. The pod systems came to life. Red lights flashed. A mechanical voice announced launch sequence initialization. Daewon braced himself against the walls as the countdown began. 10 seconds. He thought of Earth, of his sister Hana, and her 2 children. He hadn't seen them in 5 years. He had promised to visit after this run. 5 seconds. He thought of all the times people had underestimated him. All the times he had survived when others said he wouldn't. The pod launched. The force slammed him against the back wall. His vision went dark at the edges as the pod accelerated away from the eternal prospect. When his sight cleared, he pressed his face to the small window and watched his ship grow smaller against the stars. The pod's trajectory was locked. He couldn't change course. The computer showed his destination clearly, Cathara Prime. Estimated time of arrival, 47 hours. Daewon took inventory of his situation. The pod had emergency rations for 3 days. A basic survival kit with a knife, water purification tablets, and a small med kit. A communications device that appeared to be broken, its screen cracked and dark, and his own clothes still containing the small personal items he always carried. Not much to survive on a death world. With the pod's computer began playing an automated message about Cathara Prime. It was meant for colonists, an old recording from before the consortium realized what kind of planet it really was. "Welcome to Cathara Prime," a cheerful voice said. "This vibrant world offers unique opportunities for those seeking adventure and challenge." Daewon almost laughed. Unique opportunities. That was one way to describe a planet covered in predators and toxic jungle. He settled into the pod's single seat and closed his eyes. 47 hours until impact. He needed to rest, to let his body recover from the shock baton hits. He needed to prepare mentally for what was coming. Kix was wrong about one thing. Humans were resilient. Daewon had survived situations before that should have killed him. War zones, training accidents, a shuttle crash during his first year in the merchant fleet. He would survive this too. He had to. The pod hurtled through space toward the green and brown planet growing larger in the window. Cathara Prime waited below, its jungles ready to test whether one more human could beat the odds. Daewon opened his eyes and stared at the planet. "All right," he whispered to himself. "Let's see what you've got." The escape pod hit the atmosphere like a meteor. Alarms screamed as the hull temperature climbed. Daewon gripped the harness straps and gritted his teeth against the violent shaking. The pod wasn't designed for precision landing, just for getting people away from dying ships. Where it landed was up to chance and physics. The computer announced terrain detection, forest, dense canopy, impact in 30 seconds. Daewon braced himself. The pod smashed through branches and vines. Each impact threw him against the harness. Something metal tore away from the hull with a screech. Then the pod hit something solid and everything went dark. When Daewon woke, his head throbbed and blood dripped from a cut above his eye. The pod had embedded itself in mud at an angle, the door facing upward. Emergency lights flickered weakly. He released the harness and climbed out, pushing the damaged door open with effort. The jungle hit him like a physical force. Heat, humid air so thick it felt like breathing water. The smell of rot and vegetation, and something else, something chemical that burned his nostrils. Above him, the canopy blocked most of the sunlight, creating a permanent twilight. Strange calls and shrieks echoed through the trees. Daewon pulled himself out of the pod and stood on unsteady legs. The crash site was a mess of torn vegetation and scattered debris. He needed to assess his situation quickly. The survival kit was intact. The rations were damaged but mostly usable. The knife was good. The communicator was completely dead, its circuits fried during the crash. He had maybe 2.5 days of food if he stretched it. He looked around at the alien jungle. Every instinct told him this place wanted him dead. A large insect landed on his arm. It was the size of his thumb with too many legs and mandibles that clicked together. Daewon brushed it away and watched as it flew off. Within seconds, 3 more landed on him. Then 10. Then dozens. He started running. The insects followed in a cloud, their clicks becoming a buzzing roar. Daewon crashed through the undergrowth, branches whipping his face and arms. He spotted water ahead, a slow-moving stream of murky liquid. Without thinking, he dove in. The current pulled him downstream. The insects hovered above the water but didn't follow. Day-Wan let the stream carry him until the swarm was out of sight, then dragged himself onto the muddy bank. His clothes were soaked and something in the water had left a tingling sensation on his skin. He checked himself carefully. No bites, no stings. Just the cut on his head from the crash and various scrapes from his run through the jungle. First lesson learned. Don't stand still. Day-Wan spent the rest of the day finding shelter. He discovered a massive tree with roots that formed a natural hollow space. It wasn't perfect, but it would keep him dry and hidden. He used branches to create a simple barrier at the entrance. That night, he barely slept. The jungle was alive with sounds. Things moving through the canopy, screams of prey being caught. Once something large passed near his shelter, its footsteps shaking the ground. The next 5 days were a crash course in staying alive. Day-Wan learned which plants to avoid by watching what happened to small animals that ate them. He purified water using a method he improvised with the pod's solar panel. He carved notches in a piece of hull plating to mark each day. On the 6th day, he heard something different. It wasn't the usual jungle noise. This was purposeful, coordinated, multiple large creatures moving through the forest together. Hunting. Day-Wan climbed a tree to get a better view. What he saw made his blood run cold. Creatures. 6-legged and massive, each one easily the size of a small car. Their scales were black and reflected the dim light like polished stone. Eyes that glowed orange in the shadows. They moved with terrible grace, spreading out in a clear search pattern. Predators. Apex predators. Day-Wan stayed absolutely still in his tree as the pack passed below. He counted 8 of them. They communicated with low rumbling sounds that he felt in his chest rather than heard with his ears. When they were gone, he climbed down carefully. He needed to move his shelter. Those creatures had territory and he was in it. But before he could gather his things, he heard a different sound. Closer. A weak, pained rumbling. Curiosity overrode caution. Day-Wan followed the sound. He found the creature in a small clearing. It was one of the pack members, smaller than the others. Younger, he guessed. A juvenile. It lay on its side, a massive wound across its flank. The edges looked burned, as if something had blasted it with energy or acid. The creature's orange eyes fixed on him. It tried to stand but collapsed again with a rumble of pain. Every survival instinct Day-Wan had screamed at him to run. This thing could kill him with one bite. But he found himself thinking of the way the pack had moved together. The way they communicated. This wasn't just an animal. There was intelligence in those eyes. Easy, Day-Wan said softly in Korean. I'm not going to hurt you. The creature watched him but didn't attack. Maybe it was too weak. Maybe it understood he wasn't a threat. Day-Wan moved slowly, keeping his hands visible. The wound was bad, deep. If it got infected, the creature would die. Day-Wan opened his survival kit and pulled out the medical supplies. Not much, but maybe enough. He cleaned the wound with purified water. The creature flinched but held still. Its eyes never left him. Day-Wan used the antibacterial gel from the kit, spreading it carefully over the injury. Then he wrapped it with the emergency bandages, using nearly all he had. There, he said when he finished. That should help. The creature rumbled, a different sound than before. Lower, almost like a purr. Day-Wan backed away slowly and returned to his shelter. The creature stayed in the clearing. As darkness fell, Day-Wan could see its eyes glowing in the night, watching his location. He fell asleep to that strange rumbling sound. Morning came with a different rumbling, deeper, multiple sources. Day-Wan scrambled out of his shelter to find the young creature gone. In its place, surrounding his shelter in a loose circle, stood the pack. All 8 of them. They stared at him with those glowing eyes. Day-Wan stood very still, his heart hammering. This was it. They had come to kill him for interfering with their pack member. The largest one stepped forward. It was covered in scars, its scales marked with the evidence of countless fights. The pack leader, Day-Wan realized. The creature moved closer, its massive head lowering to Daewon's level. They stared at each other. Daewon forced himself not to look away, not to show fear. In his Special Forces days, he had learned that some predators saw fear as an invitation. The pack leader's eyes studied him. Daewon could almost see the intelligence working behind them, calculating, judging. Then the creature did something unexpected. It lowered its head further, not quite bowing, but acknowledging. A rumble came from deep in its chest, spreading through the pack. One by one, the other creatures rumbled in response. The young one limped into view, its bandaged wound visible. It moved to Daewon's side and settled down, looking up at him with those orange eyes. The pack leader rumbled again and turned away. The others followed, moving back into the jungle. But they didn't leave. Daewon could hear them moving through the trees around his shelter, circling, patrolling. He looked down at the young creature beside him. "I guess you're staying with me?" It rumbled softly. Daewon sat down slowly, his mind racing. He had just been adopted by a pack of alien predators. On any other world, that would be insane. But this was Cathara Prime. Normal rules didn't apply here. He reached out carefully and touched the creature's scales. They were warm and surprisingly smooth. The creature leaned into the touch. "All right then," Daewon said. "I guess we're doing this. But you need a name." The creature's scales glowed slightly in the dim light, like embers in a fire. "Ember," Daewon decided. "I'll call you Ember." The creature rumbled in approval. In the jungle around them, the pack answered with their own rumbles. For the first time since the pod crashed, Daewon felt something other than fear. He felt hope. Maybe Kix was right about humans being resilient. But what the first mate hadn't counted on was that humans could also build bridges. Even here in Hell, Daewon had found allies. The jungle was still deadly. But now he wasn't facing it alone. 3 weeks passed and Daewon learned more about the creatures than he ever thought possible. He gave them all names based on what he observed. The pack leader he called Crusher because of the way it broke through obstacles. The fastest one became Swift. The largest and most defensive became Stone. One that moved like smoke through the jungle became Shadow. And of course there was Ember, the young one who stayed closest to him. The Vraken, as he started calling them after a word they seemed to use for themselves in their rumbling language, were not simple beasts. They had social structures, hunting strategies, and even what looked like teaching behaviors. He watched Crusher show the younger pack members how to hunt. He saw Stone defend wounded packmates. He witnessed Swift scouting ahead and returning to guide the others. They communicated through those subsonic rumbles, each pattern meaning something different. Daewon couldn't reproduce the sounds, but he learned to interpret them. A short rumble meant danger nearby. A long one meant all clear. Multiple rumbles together signaled gathering for a hunt. In return, he taught them hand signals. Raised fist meant stop. Open palm meant safe. Pointing indicated direction. At first, he wasn't sure they understood. But after a few days, Swift stopped mid-stride when Daewon raised his fist and the others followed. They were learning from him just as he learned from them. The arrangement worked because Daewon contributed to the pack. His human intelligence added a new dimension to their hunting. He spotted patterns in prey behavior they missed. He identified the safest paths through dangerous terrain. When they hunted the large herbivores that roamed the jungle, he helped coordinate their attacks using his military training. Left flank, he would signal to Shadow, who understood the meaning even if not the words. Swift, circle around. Crusher, wait for my signal. The hunts became more efficient. The pack took down prey with fewer injuries. They learned to trust his judgment. Living with the Vraken changed Daewon's relationship with the jungle. He was no longer prey hiding from predators. He was part of the deadliest pack in this region. Other creatures fled when they approached. The insect swarms avoided them. Even the territorial serpents that lurked in the canopy left them alone. But the jungle still tested them. One morning, a rival pack entered their territory. Daewon heard the challenge rumbles from far away. Crusher responded immediately, the sound vibrating through the ground. The pack gathered, preparing for conflict. Daewon grabbed his spear, a weapon he had crafted from salvaged metal and a strong branch. If his pack was fighting, he would fight too. The rival pack was larger. 10 members against their 8. They met at a natural clearing where 2 streams joined. The air crackled with tension as the 2 groups faced each other. Crusher stepped forward, displaying scars and size. The rival leader did the same. For a moment, Day One thought they might avoid violence. Then the rival leader noticed him. The creature's focus shifted. It rumbled something that sounded like confusion, then aggression. To the rival pack, Day One was an oddity, a weakness in Crusher's pack. Easy prey. 3 of the rivals broke formation and charged at him. Day One set his feet and raised his spear. His pack roared behind him, but he didn't need them yet. The first creature came low and fast. He dodged and drove his spear into the joint where leg met body. The creature shrieked and stumbled. The second one learned from its companion's mistake. It came from above, leaping. But Day One had fought in forests on Earth against soldiers with guns. He rolled aside and the creature crashed into the ground where he'd been standing. The third hesitated. That hesitation saved its life. Crusher slammed into it from the side and then the full packs collided. The fight was brutal but brief. Crusher's pack had better coordination thanks to the strategies Day One had taught them. They fought as a unit while the rivals fought as individuals. Within minutes, the rival leader limped away with his remaining pack members following. They left 2 dead behind. Day One leaned on his spear, breathing hard. He had a gash on his arm and bruised ribs, but he was alive. Crusher approached and rumbled softly, the sound almost concerned. Day One managed to smile. "I'm okay," he said. "We won." That night, the pack gathered closer than usual. They groomed each other's wounds and rumbled the low sounds that meant safety and family. Day One sat among them, using his medkit to treat his injuries. Ember rested her large head in his lap. He realized he had stopped thinking about rescue. This was his life now. These creatures were his family. But that changed 2 days later when he found something in the jungle. He had been exploring further from their territory, looking for better water sources. Swift accompanied him as always. They discovered a ravine he hadn't seen before, and at the bottom lay wreckage. An old escape pod, much like the one that brought him here, but this one had been here for years. Vines covered it and rust ate at the metal. Day One climbed down carefully to investigate. Inside he found a skeleton, human, from the bone structure. The remains were old, picked clean by scavengers. But among the bones he found something valuable. A data pad protected in a sealed case. The pad's solar battery still held a charge. Day One activated it and scrolled through the files. It belonged to someone named Kim Jae-ho, another person dumped on this planet to die. The entries were dated 5 years ago. Most of the log was about survival, similar to what Day One had experienced. But the final entries mentioned something important. Jae-ho had discovered that the planet's magnetic poles could amplify communication signals. If someone could reach the northern pole and set up a transmitter there, they might be able to send a distress signal powerful enough to reach passing ships. Day One sat in the ruined pod for a long time, thinking. The northern pole was hundreds of kilometers away. The journey would take weeks through hostile territory, and between here and there lay the Blackthorn Valley, a region Jae-ho's notes marked with warnings in red text. "Avoid at all costs," the entry read. "The things that live there are worse than anything else on this planet." Swift rumbled from outside the pod, sensing his troubled mood. Day One climbed out and looked at the creature. Could he ask the pack to make such a dangerous journey? They were safe here in their territory. They had food and water and each other. Why risk it? Because he was human. Because somewhere out there, Kix was smuggling weapons that would kill people. Because his sister Hana was waiting for him to come home. Because giving up wasn't in his nature. That evening, he tried to explain it to Crusher. He used gestures and the few rumbling sounds he could make. He drew maps in the dirt. He pointed north. Crusher watched, those intelligent eyes studying the crude drawings. The pack leader rumbled thoughtfully. Then he looked at the other pack members and rumbled a different pattern. "A question," Stone rumbled agreement. Swift did too. Shadow and the others followed. Even Ember, young as she was, added her voice. Crusher turned back to Day One and lowered his head in that gesture of acknowledgement. They would follow. Day One felt a surge of emotion so strong it surprised him. These creatures, these alien predators that should have been nothing but monsters, had chosen to trust him, had chosen to follow him into danger. "Thank you," he whispered, pressing his hand against Crusher's scarred snout. "All of you." The preparation took 3 days. Day One salvaged what he could from both escape pods. He created better weapons, improved tools, and packed supplies. He studied Jeho's maps and notes until he had them memorized. On the morning of the fourth day, they left their territory behind. The jungle grew denser as they traveled north. The trees became massive, their trunks wide enough to hold buildings. The canopy closed completely overhead, creating almost total darkness. Bioluminescent fungi provided the only light, painting everything in eerie blue and green. They encountered new dangers, plants that moved and grabbed at passing prey, pools of liquid that dissolved anything that touched them, creatures that lived in the canopy and dropped down on unsuspecting travelers. But the pack adapted. Swift scouted ahead. Shadow found the safest paths. Stone broke through obstacles. Crusher led with steady confidence, and Day One guided them using his maps and instincts. 2 weeks into the journey, they reached the edge of the Blackthorn Valley. Day One stood at the rim and looked down. The valley was a scar across the jungle, kilometers wide and deep. The vegetation below was different, darker. The air rising from it smelled wrong, like chemicals and death. Jeho's notes had been clear. The valley was home to the Rothan, insectoid creatures that hunted in massive swarms. They built hives underground and emerged to strip entire areas of the jungle clean. They were relentless, fearless, and lethal. The pack gathered around him. They could sense the danger below. Their rumbles were uneasy, worried. Day One checked his weapons and supplies. He looked at his pack, at the creatures who had become his family. "We can go around," he said, even though he knew it would add weeks to their journey. "I won't force you to go through." Crusher stepped forward and looked down into the valley. Then he looked at Day One and rumbled. It was the sound that meant forward. The sound that meant together. The pack rumbled in agreement. Day One nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "All right then, together." The descent into the Blackthorn Valley took half a day. The walls were steep and covered in plants that seemed to reach for them as they passed. Day One led the way, testing each foothold before committing his weight. The Fraken followed, their claws finding purchase where a human would have fallen. By the time they reached the valley floor, the sun was setting somewhere above the thick canopy. Down here, darkness came early and complete. Day One gathered materials and built a fire. He had learned that most creatures on Cathera Prime feared flame. It was one of his advantages. The Vraken gathered around the light, their eyes reflecting orange in the firelight. The night brought sounds unlike anything they had heard before. Clicking. Thousands of tiny clicks that created a wave of noise. It came from all directions at once, surrounding them. The pack moved closer together, forming a defensive circle with Day One at the center. Something moved at the edge of the firelight. Day One caught a glimpse of segmented legs, mandibles, and armor that gleamed like black glass. Then it was gone, retreating from the flames. "Rothan," Day One whispered. They were being watched. The clicking continued all night. None of them slept. When morning finally came, the clicking faded but didn't disappear entirely. It became background noise, a reminder that they were surrounded. The valley terrain was treacherous. The ground was soft in places, hiding sinkholes that could swallow a creature whole. Strange plants grew in twisted shapes, their thorns dripping with poison. The air itself felt wrong, making breathing harder. They moved carefully, with Swift ranging ahead to scout. Day One marked their path, knowing they would need to backtrack if they hit a dead end. The valley was a maze, its features all looking similar in the dim light. On the second day in the valley, they found a hive entrance. It was a hole in the ground easily 10 meters across. The clicking came from deep inside, echoing up from unseen depths. Around the entrance, the ground was worn smooth by countless legs passing over it. "We go around," Day One signed to Crusher. The pack leader rumbled agreement, but going around took them into a swamp. The water was dark and thick, bubbling with gas that stung their eyes. Day One tested the depth with his spear, too deep to walk through. They would have to find another way. Shadow found a path along a fallen tree that bridged part of the swamp. It was narrow and slippery, but possible. Day One went first, balancing carefully. The Fraken followed one at a time, their multiple legs making balance easier. They were halfway across when the tree shifted. Something in the swamp had grabbed it. Day One felt the movement and yelled a warning. The pack scrambled faster. The tree tilted, starting to roll. Swift made it across. Stone reached solid ground. Ember was almost there when the tree rolled completely. Day1 and 4 of the Rakan fell into the swamp. The liquid burned his skin immediately. Day1 kicked hard, fighting to reach the surface. His hand found something solid and he grabbed it. Stone had waded in and extended one of his powerful legs. Day1 grabbed it and let the Vrakan pull him out. The others were climbing out too, hissing from the burning liquid. But where was Shadow? Day1 saw movement in the swamp. Shadow was caught in something, struggling. Without thinking, he dove back in. The pain was intense, but he pushed through it. His hands found Shadow's leg, tangled in vine-like tendrils that pulled her down. Day1 sawed at them with his knife. The blade cut through, but more tendrils wrapped around his own legs. Stone waded in deeper, reaching for both of them. Other pack members grabbed Stone to anchor him. It became a chain, all of them working together. Day1 cut the last tendril and Stone pulled them both free. They collapsed on solid ground, gasping. Day1's skin was red and blistered. Shadow was worse, her scales damaged. But they were alive. Ember rumbled in concern and licked Day1's burned arm. He patted her head weakly. "I'm okay. We're all okay." But they needed to treat the burns. Day1 used his remaining medical supplies on the worst injuries. He remembered seeing plants during their travels that seemed to soothe skin when touched. He sent Swift to find some while they rested. Swift returned with leaves from a specific type of tree. Day1 crushed them and applied the paste to his burns. The relief was immediate. He treated the pack's injuries next, using up all the plant paste. They couldn't stay here. The clicking had grown louder while they dealt with the swamp. The Rothan were gathering. Day1 pushed himself to his feet. His body screamed in protest, but he ignored it. "We move now," he said, signing to the pack. They pressed on, following the valley northward. The clicking followed them, sometimes ahead, sometimes behind, always there. Occasionally, Day1 would spot a Rothan at the edge of vision. They were being herded, he realized. The swarm was pushing them towards something. On the 4th day in the valley, they found out what. The path narrowed into a canyon with walls too steep to climb. The clicking came from behind, growing closer. Ahead, the canyon ended in a massive hive structure built into the valley wall. Thousands of Rothan covered it, their armored bodies moving in perfect synchronization. They were trapped. Crusher roared a challenge. The pack formed up, ready to fight. Day1 gripped his spear and looked at the approaching swarm. There were too many. Hundreds, maybe thousands. Then he saw the fuel cells from his salvaged escape pod equipment. He had been carrying them as power sources. But fuel cells could explode if ruptured correctly. "Back," he signed frantically to the pack. "Fall back to the wide part." They retreated to where the canyon opened slightly. Day1 worked quickly, prying open the fuel cells and connecting them together. He used strips of cloth as a fuse. The Rothan swarm entered the canyon like a black tide. Their clicking became deafening. Day1 lit the fuse and threw the makeshift bomb. "Run," he shouted. The pack ran. Day1 ran with them. Behind them, the explosion shook the valley. Fire and force channeled through the narrow canyon and the canyon walls cracked. They kept running as rock began to fall. The explosion had triggered a collapse. Tons of stone crashed down, sealing the canyon behind them. When the dust settled, they were on the other side of the blockage. The clicking had stopped. Day1 leaned against a rock, his heart pounding. They had made it through the worst of it, but the victory had come with a cost. Stone was missing. Day1 counted the pack frantically. Crusher, Swift, Shadow, Ember, only 4. Stone had been at the rear, protecting them from the swarm. He ran back to the rockfall and started digging with his bare hands. The pack joined him, using their powerful claws. But the rocks were massive and kept shifting. After an hour, Crusher stopped him with a gentle rumble. Stone was gone. He had held the line so the rest could escape. The pack gathered in a circle and rumbled together, a long, mournful sound that echoed through the valley. It was their way of honoring the fallen. Day1 stood with them, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry," he said to Stone's memory. "Thank you." They continued north, but the group felt smaller now. Stone's absence was like a wound that wouldn't heal. Every time Day1 looked back and expected to see the big defender there, the empty space hurt anew. 2 more days through the valley. The terrain began to slope upward. The clicking sounds faded behind them. They were leaving Rothan territory. On the 7th day after entering the valley, they climbed out the northern side. The jungle here was different, less aggressive. And in the distance, beyond the trees, Day1 could see mountains, the northern polar region. Crusher rumbled, the sound mixing exhaustion with relief. The pack was battered and smaller, but they had survived. Daewon looked at his companions. Swift, with her speed and scouting skills. Shadow, who he had saved from the swamp and who had saved him countless times. Ember, grown larger now but still the youngest. And Crusher, the leader who had trusted him from the beginning. "We made it through," Daewon said. "Stone didn't die for nothing. We're going to make it to the pole. We're going to get off this planet. All of us." The pack rumbled in agreement. They rested for a day to recover. Daewon treated their wounds and took stock of supplies. He still had the equipment needed to build a transmitter. Jeho's notes were intact. They had everything they needed. As the sun set on their first day out of the valley, Daewon sat with Ember's head in his lap. The young Vraken had barely left his side since losing Stone. She was grieving too. "We're going home," he told her quietly. "Not my home, but somewhere safe. Somewhere better than this, I promise." Ember rumbled softly and closed her eyes. Around them, the pack settled in for the night. Tomorrow they would continue north. Tomorrow they would start the final leg of their journey. Daewon looked up at the stars beginning to appear through the canopy. Somewhere up there, ships were passing by. Soon one of them would hear his call. He just had to survive a little longer. The journey to the northern pole took another 2 weeks. The jungle gradually gave way to rocky terrain, and then to frozen wasteland. The temperature dropped steadily until Daewon's breath formed clouds in the air. The Vraken struggled with the cold. They were jungle creatures built for heat and humidity. Daewon used what remained of his supplies to create wraps for their feet, protecting them from the ice. He built fires every night and kept them burning large and hot. Ember suffered the most. She was still young and her smaller body lost heat faster. Daewon let her sleep pressed against him at night, sharing his warmth. The others formed a circle around them both, their combined body heat creating a pocket of survival in the frozen waste. The pole itself was marked by magnetic anomalies that made Daewon's salvaged equipment go haywire. This was the place. This was where the signal would be strongest. He found a relatively flat area protected from the wind by rock formations. Here he would build his transmitter. The work took 3 days. Daewon used parts from both escape pods, pieces of other wreckage he had collected during the journey, and components from Jeho's old equipment. His hands went numb repeatedly as he worked with the small tools. The Vraken watched, unable to help but keeping him company. Finally, on the 3rd day, he made the final connection. The transmitter hummed to life, powered by the solar panels he had set up. The planet's magnetic field amplified the signal just as Jeho's notes had predicted. Daewon activated the distress beacon. It began broadcasting on all emergency frequencies. His identification code, his location, and a simple message. Survivor on Cathara Prime. Requesting immediate rescue. Then there was nothing to do but wait. The first day passed with no response. The second day brought only silence. On the 3rd day, Daewon began to lose hope. Maybe the signal wasn't strong enough. Maybe no ships were in range. Maybe no one cared about one lost cargo officer. On the 4th day, the transmitter crackled to life. "This is Consortium Patrol Vessel Morningstar to unknown signal. We have received your distress call. Confirm your identity." Daewon grabbed the communicator with shaking hands. "This is Daewon, formerly of the merchant vessel Eternal Prospect. I was jettisoned to this planet 47 days ago. I am requesting immediate evacuation." Silence. Then, "Daewon, this is Lieutenant Hyejin of the Morning Star. We're showing the Eternal Prospect as having no missing crew. Can you explain?" So they had covered it up. Kix had erased his existence from the records. Daewon took a breath and explained everything. The weapons smuggling, the mutiny, Captain Ven's murder, his forced ejection to Cathara Prime. More silence. Then Hyejin's voice came back harder now. "We're dispatching a shuttle to your location. Eat a 4 hours. Be ready for extraction." "Wait," Daewon said quickly. "I'm not alone. I have companions. They need evacuation too. Survivors from other crashes?" "Not exactly." Daewon looked at the Vraken gathered around him. How could he explain? They're native to this planet. They saved my life. I won't leave without them. The response took longer this time. Native fauna transport is prohibited by Consortium Regulation 712. We cannot accommodate. They're intelligent, Daewon interrupted. They communicate. They use tools. They have social structures and mourning rituals. They're not just animals, and I'm not leaving them here to die. Stand by. The wait was agonizing. Daewon sat with the pack and explained as best he could what was happening. Crusher watched him with those intelligent eyes, understanding more than Daewon could fully communicate. The communicator crackled again. Daewon, this is Captain Park of the Morning Star. Your situation is unusual. We're prepared to offer a compromise. We'll transport you and your companions to our ship, but you'll need to prove your claims about their intelligence. If they're determined to be dangerous fauna, they'll be euthanized. Understood? It wasn't ideal, but it was better than nothing. Understood? We'll be ready. 4 hours later, a shuttle descended from the sky. It landed on the frozen ground with a blast of engine heat that melted the surrounding ice. The ramp lowered and 6 armed crew members emerged, weapons ready. Lieutenant Hyjin led them. She was tall and looked capable, her eyes taking in everything at once. When she saw the Fracken, she stopped short. Those are Cathara Prime apex predators, she said flatly. They're classified as extremely dangerous. They're my family, Daewon replied, moving to stand between the soldiers and his pack. They helped me survive. They followed me through hell because they trusted me. Hyjin studied him, then studied the Vraken. Crusher rumbled low, not aggressive, but warning. The pack moved closer together but didn't attack. How do you control them? She asked. I don't control them. We work together, Daewon demonstrated, signing to Swift to scout around the shuttle. The Vraken moved smoothly, circling the vehicle and returning to report with a specific rumble pattern. Hyjin's eyes widened slightly. You taught them commands? They taught me their language. I taught them mine. It goes both ways. Daewon signed to Shadow, who moved to his side and sat. He stroked her scarred scales. These aren't mindless beasts. They're people. Just different from us. The lieutenant spoke quietly into her communicator, relaying what she was seeing. The conversation was brief. When she finished, she looked at Daewon with new respect. The captain says you can bring them aboard, but they stay in cargo hold 3 and you're responsible for them. Any aggression and we eject all of you back here, clear? Clear. Getting the Vraken onto the shuttle was challenging. They had never seen technology like this. The engine noise scared them. But Daewon went first, showing them it was safe. Ember followed immediately. Then Shadow. Swift hesitated but followed. Crusher came last, rumbling uncertainty. The shuttle lifted off. Through the window, Daewon watched Cathara Prime fall away, the green and brown planet that had been his prison and his proving ground. He pressed his hand against the glass, saying a silent goodbye to Stone and all the other creatures they had lost. The Morning Star was a patrol vessel, smaller than the Eternal Prospect, but well-armed. The crew watched nervously as the Vraken were led to cargo hold 3. Daewon had them set up heating elements and brought food. The pack settled in cautiously, staying close together in the strange environment. Captain Park summoned Daewon to the bridge. He was an older man with gray hair and sharp eyes. Tell me everything, he said. Daewon did. The entire story from start to finish. Park listened without interrupting, occasionally taking notes. When Daewon finished, the captain sat back. Kix and his accomplices are in consortium custody as of this morning. We received a tip about weapons smuggling and boarded the Eternal Prospect. They're facing multiple charges, including murder and mutiny. Your testimony will seal the case. Relief flooded through Daewon. What about the Vraken? Park's expression became complicated. That's a problem. Consortium law is clear. Non-sentient fauna cannot be transported between worlds. It's a contamination risk. They're sentient, Daewon insisted. Give me a chance to prove it. Over the next week, as the Morning Star traveled to the nearest consortium station, Daewon documented everything about the Vraken. Their communication patterns, their tool use, crude but definite, their social bonds and cooperative behavior. He recorded them solving problems, showing grief, and displaying clear intelligence. Lieutenant Hyjin became his ally. She spent time observing the pack and came to the same conclusion he had. They're not animals, she told Captain Park. They're a species we haven't properly studied. Abandoning them would be wrong. The captain reviewed the evidence and made his decision. He contacted the Xenobiological Studies Department at the nearest research station and transmitted Daewon's findings. The response came quickly. They wanted to meet the Vraken. They wanted to learn, but there was still the legal problem. The Vraken couldn't be classified as sentient without extensive study. They couldn't be transported to a research facility without clearance. And the Morning Star was due to continue its patrol. The solution came from an unexpected source. A frontier colony called New Haven had recently been established on a planet with similar conditions to Cathara Prime. The colony needed security against native predators and had requested military support. Captain Park proposed a compromise: transport the Vraken to New Haven as working animals under Day One's supervision. Once there, they could live freely while researchers studied them. It wasn't perfect, but it was freedom. Day One accepted. New Haven was beautiful. Thick forests, clean rivers, and mountains in the distance. The colony was small, only a few hundred people, but growing. When the Vraken emerged from the ship, they stood in the sunlight and rumbled with what Day One recognized as joy. The colonists were afraid at first, but Day One introduced them properly. He showed how the Vraken responded to commands, how they protected rather than attacked, how they were family. A researcher named Dr. Sung arrived from the nearest university. She was fascinated by the Vraken and began formal studies immediately. Within a month, she had enough data to submit a proposal for sentience classification. Day One was offered a job as consultant and guardian. He would work with Dr. Sung to study the Vraken, while helping the colony develop security protocols. It was steady work with purpose,